All right, this is part 2 of the video on section 3.3 on truth tables. So we're just going to do several truth tables, starting with construct a truth table for Q or P and not P. Now you always want to start when there are two letters. You want to start with this kind of configuration for the columns. P is true, true, false, false. Q goes to false, true, false. This gives us all of the possibilities for what can happen with the letter P and the letter Q. We need to build this argument. Starting with what's inside the parentheses, we will need a separate column for Q or P. We will also need a column for not P. Then we're going to be able to put this whole thing together as Q or P and not P. Now you know from before, Q or P, that under an OR statement, that as long as you have at least one true, then the conclusion is true. So true or true is true, true or false is true, false or true is true. However, false or false stays false. Not P just tells us to look back at the P column and negate all of that, which means flip-flop these. So the two T's both become F's. The two F's become T's. Now we are ready to put our whole statement together, looking at these two columns, which make up this statement. This is Q or P and not P. So it's these two columns we need to look at using the connective and. So true and false is a false. True and false is a false. True and true is a true, and false and true is a false. Remember, under an and statement, the only time that the and statement is true is if both simple statements are true, like we had right there. And this is our answer. Now, there's two ways you can see this on MathXL. Sometimes you see it on MathXL like this, where they have already written out all of these columns for you. Now, I happen to have put my not P in a different place, but that's okay. But notice the last column is what we have right here. So sometimes they've got it written out for you, and then they've got it as a drop-down menu where you'd have to enter each box at a time. Sometimes you have to just totally build it on your own. So when you see this and you don't see a drop-down menu, you're going to have to build this thing on your own paper. So we want to construct a truth table for this statement, P and not Q or R. So let's see what we need component-wise. You always want to write out your P, Q, and R with the trues and the falses. Remember, when there are three letters, we're going to have it written this way. The P column has 4 T's in a row followed by 4 F's. The Q column has 2 T's, 2 F's, 2 T's, 2 F's. And your R column is T, F, etc. Now look up here, what are we going to need? We are going to need a not Q, so I'll go ahead and get that in a position. We need a P and not Q, which will go there. And then our full statement is what you see there, P and not Q or R. So our not Q is a matter of looking at the Q column and negating all of those, which just changes all the T's to F's, all the T's to F's, and all the F's to T's. Now we want to do P and not Q. P and not Q. Two suggestions when you're doing these truth tables: use these little arrows and the circles and things. Also, you might want to have different colors as you work. So P and not Q, I'm looking at these two columns using the connective and. So we're looking at true and false is false. True and false is false. True and true is true. Remember, the only time an and statement is true is if both of these things are true. So true and false will be false. False and true will be false. False and false will be false. False and true will be false. False and false will be false. Now, another way to do this is to, let's erase all of this. Another way to do this is to just look at it from the standpoint of when is an and statement true? An and statement is true is if both columns are true. So look in the P, look in the not Q column. Where do we have true, true? Right here. Do we have any other true, trues? Yep, right there. Any other true, trues? No. Then you could go back and just fill in the rest of these as false. So you may find it easier to think that way rather than entry by entry. Then the last thing here is to put all of this together. All of this together is our P and not Q column. That's this one, or R. So we're looking at these two entries. You could circle all this up or use a highlighter just to remind you what column you're looking at. I'm looking at this, and the other one I circled in green. So I'm looking at those two under OR. When is an OR false? The only time an OR is false is if both of these are false. So false, false is going to give me a false. Any other place I have a false, false? Yep, right there. And right there. Since that's the only time an OR statement is false is if both of those are false, then I can go back and fill in trues for all of those. And this might be all MathXL asks you to enter on a drop-down menu is the last entry. Another truth table here. What are our components? PQR, we don't have any negations to do. We just have to do a P or Q. Then our other column will be the statement itself, P or Q and R. So when do you have a false for OR? The only time you have a false for an OR statement is if both of those are false. So where do we have two falses? Right here. The other way to look at the OR is as long as you have at least one T, you have yourself a true OR statement. So that's got to be true. That's got two T's, got to be true. That's got one T, got to be true. It's got a T, got to be true. It's got a T, got to be true. It's got a T, got to be true. Now we're going to put that together. We're going to put this column together with the we're going to put this column together with the R column using AND. When is an AND statement true? The only time an AND statement is true is if both component statements are true. So two trues will give me a true right here. Any other place I have two trues? Right there. Right there. And that's it. The rest of these must be false. And there is our last column, and that might be the drop-down column you have to enter on your homework. These are kind of nice. These are problems that are asking you to do like a portion of a truth table. This is just asking you to evaluate the truth value for this statement when these specific things are true. Instead of having to look at the entire chart for the P, Q, and R, all of that, they're only asking you to look at one specific instance. We want P to be true, so let me get some room here. So this is P and Q or R. So right underneath this statement, I'm going to fill in my information. P is true, so give that a T. Q is false, give that a false. R is false. And you still have the parentheses and those connectives. So false or false is false. And I started inside here because that's inside parentheses. Then this is T and F. T and F would have to give me a false. Therefore, the statement is false. Same thing here, just a little more complicated. Not P and Q, or not P and R. So taking that statement, let's fill in what we were given. P is true. So under each of these P's, I'm putting a T for true. Q is true. That's the only Q I have. And R is false. So the rest of this has to be written as is. Negation, and, or, negation in front of the parentheses, and. So the only thing I did there is I put T's or F's under P, Q, and R as I was given in the problem. Then within the parentheses, true and true is true. A negation of true makes it a false. This parenthesis over here, true and false, is false. Because remember, the only time an and statement is true is if both component statements are true. So this has to be false. We have a negation of the false, which is true. And our last connective is or, false or true. We have at least one true. So under the or connective, that will be true. You keep hearing me say the only time an and statement is true is if both are true. The only time an or statement is false is if both are false. You need to come up with some way to memorize this to make it easier to do the chart. I know you can use an index card, you can have your notes in front of you, but things go more quickly if you have a good understanding in your head. So one little thing you can think about is true, 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 false, false, false. But this is what you're going to have to come up with something to memorize. It's the and statement we're talking about being true. It's the or statement is the false.